There was 3 mounds here, really 2 small, and the one in the middle was very, very large. It's called conjoined mounds, and you got them touching each other. And they went down and they excavated this layer by layer. Actually, here they found copper and iron breastplates, copper and iron axes. And this is the picture of the dig. And these are the gentlemen here from the archaeology world of the Chicago Field Museum, matter of fact. They're the ones who did the dig. And this material, if it hasn't been moved from there, should still be in the Chicago Field Museum in Illinois. Should be there.
Welcome everybody to the Stick of Joseph. It's Hayden here. And yes, we went with Wayne May in the field to Ohio to see the Hopewell Mounds, and it was awesome. We went with Go and Do Travel, and guess what? Wayne's going to be going on another trip in October, so if you're interested in going after you see some of the stuff that we got to see, then click the link in the description, and you can join him in October. And I'm so pumped to start sharing some of the things. We're going to break these videos down into small parts, and I'm excited. We got some fun stuff coming. So the Stick of Joseph producer, Chris Jordan, and we went over. Jackson couldn't go. What we're going to see today is what we saw on the first day. We're going to learn about who the Hopewell were, where that name comes from, and we're going to see some of the mounds. So without further ado, let's get into it.
All right, well, it's morning of day 1. Today we are going to go check out a bunch of cool mounds. So let's just assume that the Hopewell are not the Book of Mormon people. The thing is, I'm still very interested to look into this stuff because it begs a question. I learned about a ton of ancient civilizations in school growing up, but I never knew about the Hopewell until I started doing Book of Mormon archaeology. Let's go.
So the first thing that we're going to look at is where the name Hopewell came from. Up to this point, I thought the Hopewell was the actual name of the civilization, but that isn't the case. There's a whole different story. So we stopped at this first place. It's called the North Fork Earthworks. Apparently, this is where the name for the Hopewell came from, and this is what we learned. Little hill that we're walking right here, it's what's left of these 3 right here. So even these have been stomped down pretty hard by farming and stuff like that, but that's the difficulty with all this. Like, I wish we could just go back to the 1800s before any of this was touched, document it all, and then release it in the Stick of Joseph 200 years later. And this is where you talked about, this is where the Hopewell got their name, was this area.
That's
what
correct.
Do you mean?
This was actually one piece of land that belonged to one gentleman, and his name was Mordecai Hopewell.
Okay.
And this was one of the places that had not been touched yet. Okay, the Smithsonian decided they had to do some of all this information pouring in from all over the state. So they looked for a place that had not been touched, and this was the place. They found this place, and Mordecai was willing to let them excavate this huge mound. There was 3 mounds here, really 2 small, and the one in the middle was very, very large. It's called conjoined mounds, and you got them touching each other. And they went down and they excavated this layer by layer, and they found all kinds of stuff. But when they finished,
there's a picture right here, right?
Yeah,
of some of the stuff they found.
Actually, here they found copper and iron breastplates, copper and iron axes. And this is the picture of the dig. And these are the gentlemen here from the archaeology world of the Chicago Field Museum, matter of fact. They're the ones who did the dig. And this material, if it hasn't been moved from there, should still be in the Chicago Field Museum in Illinois. Should be there. Iron. Yet,
but I thought metal breastplates didn't exist.
You won't see.
Okay, I want to pause right here because we're told that iron was not used here in the New World pre-Columbus. And I love Wayne May, but when I first saw this, I was like, Wayne, the books say that there is no iron that was found. So I went and checked for myself, and I found an online PDF of the Scodio Hopewell and their neighbors. And this is by Christopher Carr and Detroit Case. And like, these aren't Latter-day Saints. They also aren't crazy. I mean, these are professors of anthropology, of human evolution biology. And in this book, they are citing that, yes, there were iron. It says celts. I think that's the way you say it. But a celt is just another way of saying axe. Iron axe and copper and iron breastplates. Which, when you listen to the critics of the Book of Mormon, that's one of the main things that they harp on. There was no iron. Now, there aren't any steel swords. It doesn't say there were swords, but if they can make iron breastplates, they can make iron axes. It's not crazy to think that they could also make iron swords. And just so you know, iron is just a couple steps away from getting to steel. It's just iron mixed with carbon, and we've done episodes on high carbon steel swords that existed in Jerusalem in 600 BC. But I guess what I'm saying is, what the freak? How did we not know this? As far as I know right now, Professor Carr and Professor Case aren't kooks. But then begs the question, where are they? And let's say that they are being hidden for whatever reason. What would be the motivation for doing that?
Any iron anywhere from Kansas, which is the furthest west, all the way to the east to New York, not one piece of iron exists anywhere in the museum. You'll see copper, but not one piece of iron, because that shows sophistication and it shows high tech, and that's exactly what they did not want to do, and that folds into manifest destiny.
So Wayne mentioned something called manifest destiny. If you don't know what that is, I didn't either. But manifest destiny is essentially this way of thinking, this thought that existed in the early 19th century, which pretty much said that there was a divinely ordained right for the United States to expand its borders to the Pacific Ocean. Hey, we have this land. Give it to us. I don't care if it was your land before. And that's where you get all of the Native American skirmishes and some of the evil things that were done by people to Native Americans on their land. So what Wayne is trying to say with this manifest destiny is that it's a lot harder to get the American people behind the idea of driving out families from their homes and taking over land and committing atrocities on people if those people are civilized and intelligent. But if you can just paint them as ignorant savages, then it's a whole lot easier to get people behind the idea of doing that. Early on in American history, and a lot of people have theorized this, that there were government institutions that were hiding the true civilization and intelligent behavior of the Native Americans so that they could go and grab more land. And I don't think it's that crazy of an idea. Some people scoff at it, but to me, it doesn't seem too crazy.
You got to dumb the natives down because we're taking their land. They have no rights. They're not even citizens. And if we had a connection to the old world, all that would change, and they could make claim through a nation over there, whatever it may be. And of course, they saw the Semitic artifacts, and that really freaked them out from going back to the Mediterranean.
And these copper and iron axes and breastplates. This is corroborated by non-LDS archaeologists.
That is correct.
Right here that are talking about how 69 axes were found and 92 breastplates, along with 260 plus skeletons.
Yep. And the key words here: unsystematized and unpublished information for the Hopewell culture that has never reached the public.
Interesting.
Where's it sitting? It's in these museums. It's sitting in drawers and boxes.
Okay. So what we get from here, this site's super important because first we learn this is why it's called the Hopewell. There's not an artifact found that says we're the Hopewell people.
No.
It's named after Mordecai Hopewell, who owned this land.
That's correct.
And this is where they found evidence of both iron and copper working.
And copper. And they will also mention, I can show you later, they had one man was stretched out here in skeletal form, completely covered in copper armor, head to toe.
Huh.
And we got one like that also in Oklahoma, and he also disappeared.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. This is a cool start, a cool place
beautiful.
to start off.
Yeah. The wall and the ditches are on top, just like it shows in your image. Beyond that tree line, you'll find the ditch in the wall runs all the way over to that gap, right over there.
So you know me, I had to run over there and double check that there was in fact a wall, and there was. It kind of looks like a natural hill now because trees have grown on it over the thousands of years it's been here, but it encompasses the whole area and is definitely man-made. So the next place we went to is called the Seip Earthworks, and it has this big, huge mound called the Seip Mound. Now, this was the first time that I was introduced to these geometric earthworks. So come with me and let's take a look at all of this. Now, right now, the walls aren't massive, but when these earthworks were first discovered, we're talking 25 to 30 foot tall heaps of dirt. all the way around, which is absolutely mind-boggling to me that human beings are able to just dig that much dirt with unsophisticated tools. And so that's why I'm saying is that maybe they were a little bit more sophisticated than academics want to give them credit for. As I stood on top of this mound, I was absolutely awestruck by how massive this thing really was.
So right now I'm on top of Seip Mound. Over there, you can see is this circle. It's this little circle right here. And this is the mound that I'm standing on right there. Over here, there used to be a square area, but that has been destroyed. But this is thought to have been a ceremonial place. That this 3-part space, which consists of 2 circles and a square, somehow had something to do with religious practice, which is interesting, the idea of 3-part spaces being used for sacred ritual things. We understand that as Latter-day Saints. The ancient Jews understood that. Just having 3 shapes that are thought to have been used for ceremonial purposes isn't necessarily any sort of smoking gun, but that number 3 is really interesting, how that shows up in a lot of religious rites. So, I don't know, it's beautiful.
How many people potentially lived in here? Did people live in here? What was the whole purpose of this thing? Was it ceremonial? What was this giant mound doing, and why is it in the center of this one? Why is it 2 circles and a square? I had a lot of questions, but I thought I'd ask Wayne a few of them on the bus ride back.
So Wayne,
it was better last week.
I want to get your thoughts, because the thing that I found really interesting about that last site was, and a lot of these sites, is how it seems to use these 2 circles and a square. Do you have any thoughts on what those shapes mean, why they use that?
Well, that's part of the Hopewell mystery. The geometrics have always been just, awesome, because we look at them and we see perfect math, perfect geometry. What are they trying to tell us? It's like they're leaving something, for the people that come later that say, well, here we are, this is what we did, A square can oftentimes just be the 4 corners, the 4 cardinal directions.
Yeah.
We find that the circle oftentimes does have burial mounds in it. Not always, but sometimes. And then the big circle, of course, is where everybody hangs out. And it can be ceremonial, but can also be very much of a place just to come in case of trouble. For example, in the Book of Mormon, it talks about a place of resort. So you live outside these big walled enclosures. The one we were just at, the original sides of the walls where we walked in, those were 30 foot high.
Really?
30 foot high.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So what's going on? Why would you need a wall that big? So the point is, I think it's a place of resort. So if people living out here in the flats and they find out there's a bad army coming at them, then they run into the big enclosures for protection. And like the Book of Mormon says, a place of resort. Okay?
So not necessarily, that's not the place where everyone lives day to day. They live in the surrounding area.
Yeah.
And that can be a place where they either do like religious rites, like ceremonies, funerals and stuff.
It could also be a military enclosure. Soldiers could be in there, kind of like
guarding
full-time.
The gates. Yeah.
Yeah, full-time. No one really knows.
So the verses that Wayne are referring to can be found 4 times in the Book of Mormon. The first one is Mosiah 11:13, where it talks about how there was a hill, a great tower built on a hill north of the land Shilom, which had been a resort for the children of Nephi at the time they fled out of the land. So there's that. Then you really get it in Alma 48:5, where it talks about how the Zoramites had been acquainted with the strength of the Nephites and their places of resort. Then later on in verse 8, it says, yea, they had been strengthening the armies of the Nephites and erecting small forts or places of resort. And then listen to how it's described, how they did it. Throwing up banks of earth round about to enclose his armies, and also building walls of stone, which we are going to see walls of stone here later, to encircle them about, round about their cities and the borders of their lands, yea, all round about the land. I'm looking at this now, and it's interesting how it says round about, and that there are 2 circles and a square with these geometric earthworks. That's kind of interesting. But round obviously just means surrounding, but that was the image that came to my head. And then last, Alma 52, verse 6. But he kept his men round about, as if making preparations for war. Yea, and truly he was preparing to defend himself against them by casting up walls round about and preparing places of resort. So that is what Wayne is referring to, that maybe the people didn't actually live in here, but they were built and the people lived around, and if there was an incoming army, they would all funnel in and it would be a place of resort and protection. Maybe, I don't know. I also think it is possible that there is a ceremonial aspect. I mean, the fact that there are so many of these earthworks that match in not only geometry but in exact size, it's just very strange. And there are dozens of them. So there is a complex way that they are measuring these things, that they are building these things, and who knows exactly how they're doing it. So after day one, I honestly had more questions than answers. Yes, there are striking similarities to the people in the Book of Mormon, but let's say they aren't the people in the Book of Mormon. Then who are they? Why are they building these structures? And why am I just learning about this now? Why isn't this something that is taught in every American public school? That's a good freaking question. So later on, we're going to be going to Serpent Mound, which is a very interesting effigy mound. We're going to be checking out some of the artifacts that are very controversial. Many people say they're frauds, and we're going to be looking at those, why people think they're frauds, and then we're going to be looking at the cases of why people think they're legit. And we're going to continue to go from mound to mound and learning some very interesting things along the way. And until next time, stay curious and hungry.